Thank you for joining us on The Journey. I'm Bob Glaze, President and General Manager of Southwest Radio Church. With me is Pastor Larry Spargimino. In recent weeks, observers have noted that North Korea's President Kim Jong-un resembles a bully. He's always raising his bar of expectations. Give him a little and he wants more. Every attempt to satisfy his demands produces more outrageous demands. However, he is a bully like no other. He possesses nuclear weapons technology. What outrageous demands Kim will make is anybody's guess.
The South China Morning Post reports that North Korea has vowed to execute South Korea's former president and her spy director, accusing them of planning to assassinate North Korea's president. Kim Jong-un said it will impose the death penalty on former South Korean president and her former spy chief, and they could receive a, quote, miserable dog's death at any time, at any place, and by whatever methods from this moment, close quotes. North Korea demanded that South Korea hand over Park and her assistant under international convention rules because they committed state-sponsored terrorism. Relations between the rival Koreas deteriorated under Park's conservative government, which maintained a hard line toward North Korea. The North conducted 2 nuclear tests and a series of missile launches during her presidency and also expanded its nuclear weapons program. North Korea frequently used invectives toward Park, once calling her a murderous demon, destined to meet a sudden and violent death, close quotes.
North Korea has a notorious record of human rights abuses, including the torture of prisoners and beating young women by punching and stomping. Recent videos smuggled out of the Hermit Kingdom reveal a sad testimony of physical cruelty and humiliation. This is a regime that knows no limits. July 4th, North Korea fired a 2-stage intercontinental missile that shows an advance in their missile program. It announced that it was now able to target locations in Hawaii, Alaska, and most of the continental United States. Although North Korea is barred under a UN resolution from firing ballistic missiles, it routinely does so anyway, saying its nuclear arsenal is a necessary tool to defend itself from the United States.
On July the 7th, 2 U.S. B-1B bombers and South Korean fighter jets conducted bombing exercises that included practicing attack capabilities at a training range 50 miles south of the DMZ. Following the mock bombing run, they then flew north in a show of force to North Korea just days after the regime tested its ICBM. Pacific Air Forces Commander General Terence O'Shaughnessy said, "Let me be clear. If called upon, we are trained, equipped, and ready to unleash the full lethal capability of our allied air forces," close quotes. As could be expected, North Korea was furious and declared that the training flight of the B-1B bombers was a dangerous provocation and that the United States will have to bear the full responsibility of its aggressive actions.
For several months, observers have dismissed the possibility of U.S. military action against North Korea's weapons program as unthinkable. But after Kim's rogue regime test fired a ballistic missile that could possibly target Hawaii, Alaska, and the U.S. mainland, a sudden, devastating preemptive strike no longer looks so inconceivable. The last resort may be the best option. An overwhelming military response poses innumerable risks, however, some perhaps even unseen. But for U.S. policymakers, the time may soon be approaching when the risk of continuing to pursue a peaceful solution may be greater than the dangers of military action. Some argue that the longer the U.S. delays in dealing forcibly with the problem, the more North Korea will have stockpiled warheads and made more advances in ballistic missile technology. There can be no reasonable doubt that Kim is a paranoid megalomaniac. In his mind, the slaughter of millions of Americans, South Koreans, and anyone else who gets in his way is justifiable homicide.
As North Korea's neighbor and biggest economic partner, China would like to see a multilateral deal under which Kim would agree to halt his weapons program. In return, the U.S. would discontinue military exercises with South Korea, end economic sanctions, open diplomatic relations with Pyongyang, and eventually withdraw its armed forces from the Korean peninsula.
The chances of such a benign solution are slim. President Trump has roundly condemned a similar 2015 deal with Iran, and given North Korea's long record of violating its previous agreements, there is little enthusiasm among North Korea's other near neighbors for striking a bargain. The lesson of recent history in Iraq and Libya have taught Kim that rogue regimes which cannot maintain a substantial weapons capability are likely to get toppled. Kim knows this and is hardly likely to budge from his hardline position and his nuclear weapons program.
It is becoming increasingly clear that there is no easy way out. None of the options bear any good tidings. The Wall Street Journal reports that there are 164 nations that are doing business with North Korea. Somebody is getting rich on what could be a disaster of monstrous proportions. It is time for concerts of prayer throughout the world for this developing scenario. Humanity is in desperate need of God's help. Pray for the U.S. military and for the many good people in North Korea who are being oppressed by a monster. How did we get into such a situation in the first place? North Korea's military buildup did not happen overnight. Did the West think that Kim would somehow change his mind and pursue a different course? Is this the judgment of God on the world? Are we about to be ushered into the final hour? In any case, appeasement and compromise is not the answer. Who knows what Kim will demand from us if we follow that course of action?
In the summer of 2016, an 18-year-old German gunman murdered 9 people in Munich, Germany. Later reports indicate that he was a fan of first-person shooter video games. This detail has led many to worry that violent video games may be negatively affecting their own children. Is that true?
Both the American Psychological Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics take a firm stand against children and teens playing violent video games. There's a definite correlation between violent video games and crimes of violence. 85% or more of the video games on the market contain some form of violence, as the titles indicate: Manhunt, Thrill Kill, Gears of War, and Mortal Kombat.
In August 2015, the American Psychological Association reported that research demonstrated a definite link between violent video games and both increases in aggressive behavior and decreases in pro-social behavior, empathy, and moral engagement.
In its recent guideline on media violence, the American Academy of Pediatrics warned that violent media sets a poor example for kids. Video games, the Academy noted, should not use human or other living targets or award points for killing, because this teaches children to associate pleasure and success with their ability to cause pain and suffering in others.
This seems like clear, no-nonsense arguments that should persuade parents that certain video games can lead to violent behavior. However, this does not represent the views of the entire field. Some social scientists have come up with very different results. Whitney DeCamp, an associate professor of sociology at Western Michigan University, says the evidence points to either no relationship between playing video games and violent behavior or an insignificant link between the two.
Once again, the Bible clears up the confusion. Philippians 4, verse 8 tells us what should fill our minds. The apostle writes, "Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things."
Children are not the only ones immersing themselves in video games. Young men are being numbed by video games as well. It is kind of an anesthetic for the male soul. The unemployed, disaffected 20-something male who haunts his parents' basement is spending an overwhelming bulk of their time playing video games. In the year 2000, 35% of young men without college degrees lived in their parents' home. Today, a majority of young men do, and among the unemployed, that number is a staggering 70%. According to University of Chicago economist Eric Hurst, these men are spending the overwhelming bulk of their time playing video games. Hurst admits of his own 12-year-old son. If it were up to him, I have no doubt he would play video games 23 and a half hours per day. I am not sure he would ever eat.
The sheer scale of all this has led to an unprecedented social transition. Millions of young men, unable or uninterested in finding employment, are simply choosing instead to unplug from society and immerse themselves in digital distraction. Some see nothing wrong with this. Video gaming offers a kind of psychological anesthetic, a job substitute that numbs the pain of unemployment and keeps young men from taking their frustration out in less socially acceptable ways. John Stonestreet, writing for Breakpoint, sees video gaming as a poor substitute for living in the real world. Habitual video gaming use, says Stonestreet, is not a substitute for real work, or for the young wives I've spoken with who married video game addicts, neither is it a substitute for real relationships. We are not created for distraction, close quotes.
One of the most important things parents can give their children, especially young men, are boundaries when it comes to games and distractions. Even more importantly, parents should challenge their young men to actively engage the world around them. Jesus called us to be salt and light. A Canadian sniper set a world record hit on an ISIS fighter. It was a 3,800-yard shot. That's 2.2 miles. The shot disrupted a potentially deadly operation by the terror group in Iraq. The feat, pulled off by a Special Forces sniper from Canada's Joint Task Force 2, smashed an earlier record set by a British sniper.
The rifle that was used was the Macmillan TAC-50, a 50 caliber weapon manufactured in Phoenix, Arizona, USA. The TAC-50 is the largest shoulder-fired firearm in existence. The company states that, quote, the Macmillan tactical rifle is designed for professional marksmen assigned with a critical mission in the harsh conditions of the real world, close quotes.
Ryan Kleckner, a former U.S. Army Ranger sniper who served 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan and wrote the authoritative long-range shooting handbook, called the shot an incredible accomplishment. Kleckner said the spotter would have had to successfully calculate several factors: distance, wind, atmospheric conditions, and the speed of the Earth's rotation at that latitude. To get the atmospheric conditions just right, the spotter would have had to understand the temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure of the air the bullet had to travel through.
Kleckner said the key to having a sniper round travel that far and hit a small target has less to do with speed and more to do with the efficiency with which the projectile moves through the air. While sniper bullets exit the muzzle at several times the speed of sound, they eventually slow down to less than the speed of sound. It is at that point that they become less stable. An efficiently designed bullet reduces that instability, said Kleckner.
Modern weaponry is growing in both lethality and accuracy. Intercontinental ballistic missiles can span oceans and continents. God, however, reserves a competitive edge for himself. God sees and hears what we cannot see and hear. Though he is merciful, he is also just. He offers salvation through Jesus Christ, and he tells us why we need it. Neither is there any creature that is not manifest in his sight. We read in Hebrews 4:13, but all things are naked and opened unto the eyes of him with whom we have to do. As if the terrorist bombings and stabbings in the UK are not sufficient to raise our blood pressure, UK Daily Mail announces a devastating global cyber attack is imminent, warn experts. Reading from the report, quote, the hack called Exploding Can targets computers running on Microsoft Windows 2003, which means it could be used to attack 375,000 computers worldwide. If you find yourself a victim of the attack, not even Microsoft can help you, as the firm has declared Windows 2003 out of support.
Another report, this one in the Wall Street Journal, titled "Cyber Experts Identify Malware That Could Disrupt U.S. Power Grid," tells of an incident that took out electricity in Ukraine's capital city last year. Experts are now convinced that the crash override could be repurposed to target U.S. systems.
In another report, we read that North Korea's recent so-called failed missile test may have actually been a test for an EMP attack on the United States. The device exploded at the exact altitude needed for creating a devastating electromagnetic pulse known as an EMP. An electromagnetic pulse produced by a high-altitude nuclear detonation instantly generates powerful electric currents in antennas and electric cables on the ground, which in turn leads to overvoltage in electric devices, causing them to break down or malfunction. The North Korean missile launched on April the 29th exploded at an altitude of 71 kilometers. It was within the ionosphere, the ionized layer of the Earth's atmosphere, where a nuclear blast can generate enormously destructive effects and destroy the power grid. The lights go out and stay out. Everything from pacemakers to computers is fried. Automobiles, trucks, airplanes, and generators stop. Light bulbs explode and the electrical systems used in nuclear reactors die. Food, water, gas supplies, and telecommunications are disabled.
Well, the internet has been a great blessing. The internet's connections create a structural vulnerability. Our cyber connections can be exploited by individuals, groups, and governments, which has led to coining the term cyber warfare. This refers to actions by a nation-state or highly sophisticated individuals to penetrate another nation's computers or networks for the purpose of causing damage or disruption. According to the book Future War by Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, cyber warfare has 5 characteristics. First, it features an extremely dynamic new battle space. 2, distance or range is not a factor. 3, operations tend to be decentralized and anonymous. 4, it is primarily an offensive weapon. And 5, it is essentially low cost with a potentially great payoff. That is the crippling or even destruction of a nation. Millions could die as hospital infrastructures are wiped out and as sewage treatment plants no longer function.
The real tragedy is that the liberal media keeps on reporting fake news and is allowing political correctness to cripple law enforcement and necessary military operations. The continual mudslinging at the president and the refusal for the courts to allow President Trump to take the necessary actions to protect the American people form a real and present danger.
In the wake of all the attacks in the UK, London Police Commissioner told the Associated Press, "It's desperately sad and poignant, but among those who died is someone who is British. There are French, Australian, Canadian, Spanish." She went on and said that longtime Londoners value this international aspect of the British capital. Quote, "We believe, of course, that's what makes our city so great," she said. "It's a place where the vast majority of time it's incredibly integrated, and that diversity gives us strength." So says the London Police Commissioner. Diversity indeed. A diverse group of terrorists who are never stopped until they blow up innocent people. This is not the time to celebrate diversity. The commissioner is not talking about diversity, she's talking about death. Is diversity accomplished by having some healthy people and some sick people? Do we need a good mix of people, some with tuberculosis and some with Ebola? The UK needs to get real. How many more terrorist attacks do they need for them to wake up? Will they ever wake up? Like many in America, they are in a state of denial. These are the last days, friends. Let's rub the sleep from our eyes. Let's wake up. For a culture that is asleep, Romans 13 provides good medicine, and I quote it. "Knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light."
Scott Lively, an evangelical pastor, activist, and attorney, embroiled in a case brought against him by an LGBT activist group, Sexual Minorities Uganda, has been labeled a crackpot bigot by the U.S. District Court Judge Michael Ponzer. Judge Ponzer said Lively's biblical views on sexuality violate international law. The judge threw a volley of demeaning phrases at Pastor Lively, such as pathetic, ludicrous, and abhorrent, to describe Lively's biblical views. The LGBT activist group is being represented in court by the George Soros-funded Center for Constitutional Rights. According to Liberty Counsel attorneys representing Lively, Judge Ponzer had no jurisdiction to even hear the case. Liberty Counsel founder and chairman Matt Staver said it is improper for a judge who clearly lacks jurisdiction to hear a case to make findings unrelated to the disposition of the case.
Pastor Lively has been at the center of international controversy for several years. Lively has called for the criminalization of gay advocacy and has had a large following in the African country of Uganda. He claimed that foreign agitators are seeking to destroy the Ugandan home and family and are trying to unravel Uganda's social fabric by spreading the, quote, disease of homosexuality to children. In 2009, he met with leaders in Uganda and spoke to thousands of Ugandans from all walks of life. This meeting led to the development of the Uganda Anti-Homosexuality Act, which advocated the death penalty in certain cases of homosexual activity. This brought a series of legal actions against Lively by activists who were horrified by Lively's rhetoric, which they claimed highly inflammatory.
Lively expressed disappointment that the legislation in Uganda was so harsh. Lively says he recommended an approach rooted in rehabilitation, not punishment, and said that the anti-gay bill goes too far. He has stated that he will endorse the Ugandan bill if the death penalty is removed. Lively has also traveled in the Baltic nations and in Russia. Lively is credited with encouraging Russian President Vladimir Putin to promote anti-LGBT legislation in Russia.
As we look at this situation and other items of controversy in our world, such as Islam, immigration, Second Amendment issues, and racial conflict, it seems that good people can often use bad rhetoric that does great harm to their case. When perception is reality, be careful how the other side perceives you. While we want to pursue the truth and righteousness with commitment and zeal, it is good to remember two scriptures. One is found in Ephesians 4:15. It encourages us to speak the truth in love. Obviously a hard thing to do since so many seem to miss it. 1 Peter 3:15 is also similar. It tells us to be ready always to tell others why we have the hope that we enjoy, but we are to do it with respect. The Bible not only tells us what to say, but how to say it. No doubt only God can change a heart, but God loves to use people whose zeal is tempered by love and compassion. As J. Vernon McGee used to say, we need to keep the main thing, and that is the gospel of Christ.
Christian apologist Frank Turek was in London at the time of the terrorist attack on the London Bridge. He was scheduled to speak at several churches on his book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. The morning after the attack, he changed the title of his talks to, If God Exists, Why Is There Evil in the World? His approach would be to show that if the terrorist attack was truly evil, then it shows that God really does exist.
Turek refers to C.S. Lewis and his famous work, Mere Christianity. At one time, C.S. Lewis was an atheist who thought all the injustice in the world disproved God. However, Lewis changed his mind when he realized he was stealing a moral standard from God in order to argue against him. Lewis said that his atheist argument against the existence of God was that the universe seemed cruel and unjust. But then he asked himself the question, how did I get this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? C.S. Lewis was comparing this unjust universe to God's perfectly just nature while claiming that God didn't exist. In effect, Lewis was sitting in God's lap to slap his face.
During the bombing of London during World War II, Lewis was on the radio saying, quote, the moment you say that one set of moral ideas can be better than another, you are, in fact, measuring them both by standards, saying that one of them conforms to that standard more nearly than the other. but the standard that measures two things is something different from either." Close quotes.
The Bible acknowledges that evil is real, but it provides a twofold answer to evil. First, God provides the ultimate solution to evil by taking evil upon himself. Jesus attaches humanity to his divine nature and allows the creatures who introduced evil into the world to torture and kill him. Jesus takes the punishment for our evil deeds and offers forgiveness as a gift. Secondly, God provides for the final dissipation and removal of evil in the future. Just because evil exists at present does not mean that it will always exist. Evil is not the last word. Redemption is. According to Romans 8, even the creation will be redeemed from the curse of evil.
Evil does exist. There is pain and suffering. There is evil caused by man. There's evil caused by nature, floods and storms being great evil. Atheism offers no redemption. Only Jesus Christ does.
Jesus Christ is not simply a messenger from God. He is the message of God, the standard that we are to emulate. What would Jesus do is a good question. His life and ministry gives us the perfect example of what we should do and how we should live. In John 13, Jesus said, "A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another."
The problem of evil is really no problem for a consistent Christian worldview, but it is for an atheistic worldview. Without God, there is no objective, authoritative moral standard beyond humanity, which means human beings have no moral obligations. Every action or behavior is merely a matter of human opinion. Do you think terrorist attacks are wrong? Without God, there is just your opinion against that of an ISIS terrorist. The murder of 6 million Jews is just your opinion against Hitler's opinion. It's only wrong if God exists.
Frank Turek writes, "If evil is real, as headlines from around the world reveal, then God exists. The best evil can do is show there's a devil out there, but it cannot disprove God. The very existence of evil boomerangs back to show that God exists." Thank you for being with us. It is our privilege to serve you. We hope you've been able to discern the Lord's hand in world events. In the words of Francis Schaeffer, He is here and He is not silent. Long ago, the prophet Isaiah gave us a message that we need to hold on to. It's found in Isaiah 46:10, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, "My counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure." We hope you can join us next week, and remember, God is still on the throne and prayer changes things.